Boldy wanted to say hi, so here he is. But now that it's officially the first day of July, I wanted to do my June wrap-up. So here it is. I ended up reading 7 books in the month of June, and I still have so many left on my TBR, or my currently reading, that I talked about in my currently reading video for June. And there's still a lot, but I got through 7 of them, so that's good. So let's go ahead and get started. Also, I apologize if you can hear the air conditioner in the background, but I'm sure a lot of you are going through this horrendous heat wave with me. So I'm not about to turn that off and have Boldy and I die of heat stroke or heat exhaustion or something. Okay, let's put him down. He's over it now. All right, so the first book I read in June was The Next Generation of Women Leaders by Selena Rezvani. That was just a 2-star read for me. There wasn't anything really wrong with it. It just wasn't for me. I am working my way through a list of 20 inspiring books by women leaders or something like that, and that was on there. So it just wasn't for me. I'm not saying it can't be helpful to someone who is an entrepreneur or anything like that, but for me, it just wasn't helpful. And I just feel like a lot of these next generation of women leader type books all kind of say the same thing. They just say it a little bit differently. So it's like, in my opinion, if you've read one, you've kind of read them all. So it was just a 2-star read for me. The second book I read was On the Line by Serena Williams, and that was her memoir that came out in 2009. So obviously a lot has changed in the 17 years since she released that memoir, but what kind of got me interested in reading that is that I watched her documentary on HBO that came out, I think, in 2017, something like that. She had just given birth to her first daughter, and she was getting married to Alexis Ohanian at the time. So around that time period, so I believe it's around 2017. And I feel like I didn't really get to know Serena. Like, I feel like there was a lot of moments in which she was kind of like guarded, and even though it was supposed to be like a documentary about her, I just didn't feel like I really learned about her. So that's what inspired me to pick up this book, and I did learn a lot more about her than I did in the documentary. I do wish it was a little bit more recent, because like I said, so much had changed since then. Like, she won so many more titles and everything in the 17 years since, or not even the 17 years, just between the documentary and the book being released. It's almost 10 years. So much had changed, but there was like a lot that I learned. Like, she mentions something about an incident at Indian Wells in her documentary, and I had no idea what had happened, because I don't follow sports really too closely. So in the memoir, she actually goes into details about Indian Wells, what happened there, and why she and her family boycotted it for so long. And I can understand not wanting to really relive that, because it was so horrifyingly racist what she and her family experienced there. But it's also like, if you're not in the know, I don't know. I don't think she needed to go into too much detail, but like, just instances where like that, where it's like, I don't feel like I'm learning about you. I feel like there's a guard up, and it's like, in a documentary, we kind of need to, you don't need to let your guard completely down, but there needs to be a little bit more information. So I do feel like I learned a lot more about her in her memoir, and it was a 3-star read for me. Not bad, not necessarily standout, but not bad. The third book I read, I actually have. This is the only non-library book that I finished, so I actually have a physical copy, and it is Salt Bones, a novel by Jennifer Givon. And this book I won in an Instagram giveaway hosted by Tomes and Textiles. And yeah, this was a really, I absolutely loved this book. This would have definitely been in the running for or it was in the running for being my favorite book that I read in June, until a book came out at the last second and snatched that title away. But this was a 4-star read for me, and I absolutely loved it. I was very immersed in the mystery of it. I was immersed in the characters' lives, and it very much kind of felt like a novela. So, but not as melodramatic. But I was really engrossed in the mystery and the messiness of it all. So I really recommend it. This was more of a slow burn kind of thriller mystery, which is not usually how I like my thriller mysteries. If I'm reading a thriller mystery, like, I want it to keep the action moving, keep me on my toes. I don't want like slow burn. This one was one of the exceptions. I really enjoyed this one, and the pacing of it I thought was really well, and it kept me wanting to like read ahead to figure out what was going on. But yeah, so I highly recommend it. The 4th book I read was The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot, and that was also a 3-star read for me. It was interesting to learn about Henrietta Lacks because I had never heard of her or what her cells have done for medical science since they were taken from her without her consent. So I really enjoyed learning about Henrietta. That being said, a lot of the book, and mind you, there isn't a lot of information about her out there, and like her family is still guards her and keeps her close to their hearts, which I completely understand after everything that happened with her, like having her cells taken without her consent and them not knowing that this had even happened until many years down the line. So I can understand why they're not exactly forthcoming, and they're very protective of her image and everything. So I'm definitely not blaming the family or anything like that. But since there is so little information on her out there, I don't know. I wish Rebecca Skloot had maybe focused a little bit more on Gila and everything that happened with Gila, and it kind of turned into her adventures with Deborah, who is Henrietta's daughter, who had spent years and years trying to find out exactly what happened to her mother and what happened to her older sister, because what happened to her older sister was kind of a mystery. And not that there's anything wrong with that per se, but it did feel kind of exploitative of Deborah and the Lacks family in general at times. So that just didn't really sit right with me. And yeah, maybe I'm glad I at least learned something about Henrietta, but that was just kind of my main issue with it. And I don't know, I guess I still expected to learn even more about Henrietta, or at least the Gila cells, and without exploiting her family, who resisted Skloot's advances of trying to interview them for a long time before they finally gave in. So that's just kind of how I felt about it. The next book I read is Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Haig, and that was a 4-star book for me. I really resonated with the subject material. It is part memoir, I guess, of Matt Haig's time dealing with severe depression and anxiety, and it was like that really debilitating kind that prevented him from fully living his life, and just the hope that he's found since then, and his reasons to stay alive. And I went through a really difficult depression in 2023, so 3 years ago, and Thankfully, I'm still here, but I was very close to not being here anymore at that time. And so it really spoke to me, it really resonated with me. I think it really explained how it feels, but it's still, it even though it's difficult subject matter, it's written in a way that's easy to digest, and it doesn't feel condescending or like you're being talked down to. So if you have experienced something like this, I think that you'll resonate with the message of the book. And if you're someone who hasn't experienced that, it can give you a great insight into someone you know that may be experiencing something like it. So I recommend it, and I really enjoyed it. The 6th book I read was Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay, and that was a 3-star read for me, which I'm kind of bummed about. That book had been on my TBR for such a long time, and I finally got around to it, and it was kind of just for me. I wanted more, and I guess I just didn't get what I was expecting. I would recommend Gay's memoir Hunger. I mean, I even have a copy of it, more than I would recommend Bad Feminist. I think there are still some good essays in there, but I don't know, in terms, it was more just disappointing for me. And if I'm going to recommend a book by her, I would more recommend Hunger. And the last book I read in June is oh my gosh, I'm blanking out on the name. Why We Fight by Saeed Jones. I'm getting the title wrong. Oh my gosh, Why We Fight for Ourselves. Why We Fight for Ourselves by Saeed Jones, which is a beautifully written memoir, and that ended up being my favorite read of June. It was a 4.5-star read for me. It's so beautifully written. It's under 200 pages, so it's very easy to get through to read, but it's so beautifully written. And obviously it's beautifully written, but it's so devastating because Saeed is a Black gay man, and so he talks about being afraid to come out and the things that he experienced as a young man who was in the closet, and then even after coming out, how he still didn't feel like he could be himself around some of his friends and loved ones. And so that's really devastating. And yeah, it's absolutely beautifully written. It's really, really sad, so just be prepared for how emotional it is. But I can't recommend it enough. I thought, like, just the way it's written, like I'm just so focused on that. And it doesn't sugarcoat anything. Like, he tells us about the good things he experienced, but he tells us all about the really ugly things that he experienced as well. And he takes us there, and he's really open and vulnerable. And so it's something that I definitely appreciated. So those are all the books that I read in June. If you've read any of these, let me know and what you thought of them. And if you haven't read any of these, or even if you have, let me know what your favorite book that you read in the month of June was. And I'll see you next time. Bye.